Today has been a really, really bad day. 3 hours of sleep last night. I feel worse today than I just feel like if someone went boo, I would fall to pieces. 3 hours of sleep. My eyes are screwed up, my ears, my sinuses, my skull hurts, top of my head hurts from so little sleep, like my brain hurts. So I stopped CPAP. So, as your medical story goes on and on, you stop and reevaluate. When you can't figure things out, like sometimes it can take you decades to figure out what's medically really happening, or there's lots of people who go to their graves never understanding even what was wrong with their health. And there's questions in my healthcare and missing information, and it makes me wonder, various doctors have refused care, and it makes me wonder, how much was this, how much of me being sick was caused by medications. And they want to, they don't want to they don't want to talk about this. They don't want to, you'll go to appointments, and this is an area they don't want to talk about, and what the harm that has been caused by medications or by prescribing. I see some people where doctors actually are having transparent conversations with them about what actually happened to them. Like, let's say they're talking to them about, okay, I think the medication did that, and blah, blah, blah. And there are people who, there's no way doctors will even speak. Doctors will just sit silent during appointments. They refuse to speak about any potential damage that has been caused by prescribing. And when you're a patient and you're terrified, you're in medical crisis, you're literally in medical crisis, let's say fighting to breathe or whatever, the last thing you think is going to happen is that they're not going to be truthful, or they're going to be holding back information and not wanting to speak. Or refusing you care because you have medical damage. The last thing that you think is going to happen is that. And it's shocking, it's terrifying. It's a betrayal of trust. So, and once you deal with the fact that, I don't want to talk about legal stuff here, but you can't, that's not going to happen in Canada. You're not going to. I know all sorts of people in the States. I have friends that have won lawsuits in the States. That's not going to happen in Canada. And there's no point in talking about it. And I'm not going to argue or explain anything. You go down that rabbit hole yourself and find out the truth. And so given that fact, and once you accept that's not going to happen. That's not going to be part of your story. And doctors know that. And most patients don't understand that's not going to happen in Canada. But once you understand that, they're safer to speak the truth if they know a lawsuit's not going to happen, right? So I can understand them protecting each other, wanting to protect each other, wanting to protect themselves from a lawsuit. Lawsuits aren't going to happen here. So theoretically, doctors here should feel safer to speak about what actually transpired, medical injuries, medication injuries. They generally are safer to speak because they're not going to get dinged with a lawsuit. But that doesn't change anything. So it's fierce silence and like just they become stone walls and refuse to speak. And with my and like all I want to know is what really is all going on here, what all happened, prognosis. And, like, I just want to know the truth. I want to know, what's coming. I have had apnea for decades. I've been trying to, I'm still trying to figure out what's all going on here. I was, gosh, like the stuff the behavior that I've seen. Like one doctor years ago, 15 years ago, was deliberately okay. So sleep apnea is when you're stopping breathing during the night and you need help and you need to be put on a machine with a mask and a hose that goes to the machine and it blows air at you while you're sleeping, and it prompts you to breathe over and over again when you stop breathing. That's sleep apnea. And the machine and mask, it's called CPAP treatment. So I had been asking, I'd been in crisis for a long time, not sleeping, and asking, is there any way someone can watch me sleep? One doctor deliberately and I realize this now later. They deliberately knew that we have a sleep lab in the hospital here, and they just deliberately misled me and withheld that information from me when I was in crisis. They deliberately withheld that information from me because they didn't think that anything was wrong with me, and they knew if I caught wind that we have a sleep lab in here, that I would be fighting to get into that sleep lab, and I would be fighting to get a referral. And she was so sure that nothing was wrong, and she was wrong. And then I finally had to leave. I still have severe insomnia. Severe insomnia. And doctors didn't believe how bad it was. And I was saying, to 2 different doctors long term, I can't breathe in bed. When I get into bed, my body doesn't want to breathe. And something bad is happening to me while I'm asleep. Like, ding, 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 ding. These doctors should see red flashing lights that I probably have sleep apnea. So here's the thing. I had my first sleep study 10 years ago, and I'd actually forgotten about this. More than 10 years ago. And I was so discombobulated at this sleep study. And I can see what medications I was on. I ended up weaning off all the medications to fight for my health and fight for medical answers and to fight for my life. And here's the thing. When you go for that sleep study, and I've seen people ask this, and you're kind of screwed because you've got no one to ask. You can't call your doctor at the night of the sleep study. You get there, or you're packing to go to the sleep study, and it's after hours. You can't phone your doctor because it's after hours. You get to the hospital or the clinic, and these people aren't going to advise you because they're not your doctor. So the question is, you realize, oh my God, like, should I take my normal sleep medication that I'm prescribed for sleep? And should you take your sleep medication when you're going for a sleep study to see if something's wrong with you while you're asleep? Should you go in unmedicated, like as your natural self? Or should you go in with the medications you're taking every night? Like, what's your baseline? What do you know what I mean? Should you or should you not? And I had no idea. I asked the technician. They said, I don't know. You have to ask your doctor. You can't call your doctor at night from the hospital. So there's no one to advise you. So I thought, well, we probably want to see if something's organically wrong with me, if something's really wrong with me without the medications, right? So I had the sleep. I was sleeping 3 hours at a time that night. At that period of time, I was sleeping 3 hours every night. And so I thought, well, I'm not going to take the medications because we want to go in this organically. And the doctor comes in the morning and he says, oh, you had 5 hours of sleep. I said, no, that can't be right. That can't be. I don't sleep that much. And he made notes that I had a perception problem and this and that. And apparently there was no apnea. And I'm like, what just happened here? And there were notes that, well, she seemed confused and angry and frustrated and saying that she can't live like this anymore. And yeah, you're right. I'd been sleeping 3 hours a night for years. Yep, I was fed up. But what happened? Why did nothing wrong show up on that sleep study? And you know why? Because, you know what? I didn't take the medication. And it took me years to figure that out. So if I would have taken the medication, would severe apnea have shown up? So a few years later, moving forward, I ended up weaning off of the medications that I was on. And at the next sleep study, I was actually in acute Zopiclone withdrawal. I was freshly off clonazepam. I was severely in withdrawal. I was fighting for my life. I was stopping breathing nonstop. Now remember, I'd been fighting to get into that sleep lab for years. So something when I was not in withdrawal. So things are happening to me when I'm asleep and trying to fall asleep. Okay, so the next sleep study, I'm in acute withdrawal. I have severe sleep apnea. Nobody believed me. The doctor was shocked. The doctor refused to talk about the medications. I said, like, how do you think these medications have been impacting my sleep? And what about the Chiari malformation? How do you think that's impacting my sleep? How do you think both these issues, the medications that I was on and the Chiari malformation, how do you think these things are impacting my breathing, whether I'm able to sufficiently breathe at night? He refused to speak. I'm sitting there with one of, our top people who's refusing to answer questions. So I'm not necessarily saying this in an accusatory way, but how many people are being made sick from medications?